Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for a little lunch learning session. So my name is Emily, and I'm the Grants and Communications Coordinator at the Community Foundation of Southeastern Alberta. You might be familiar with Sydney, who is on maternity leave. She's usually the Grants and Communications Coordinator. So if you haven't got a chance to meet, I'm filling in for her just until she returns. So if we haven't already been introduced, it's nice to meet you. As you can probably see, I'm recording the webinar for anyone to reference, and I'm going to upload it to our YouTube channel afterwards. So if you want to watch it again, or if a coworker wants to watch it, it'll be available, and then I'll be sending out an email later today with the link attached. So before we begin, just in the spirit of respect, truth, and reciprocity, I want to acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples who have lived in and cared for these lands for generations. We're grateful for the traditional elders and knowledge keepers who are still with us today, and for those who have gone before us. And then I ask, if you have any questions, just please pop them in the chat box and we will get to them after the presentation has ended. So just a little of what we're going over today. Here's our agenda. So I'm going to go over about the Community Foundation of Southeastern Alberta, our 2026 granting priorities. They haven't changed that much, but just in case, if there's anyone new applying, any administration stuff, eligibility, our application process, and tips and tricks for grant writing. All right, so just about the Community Foundation. At the Community Foundation, we're built really on three pillars, which is we grow, we give, and we inspire. So we grow by accepting donations from the public and investing them into an endowment fund. So when a donation is made to the Community Foundation, it's never spent, it's immediately invested. So that investment revenue continues to grow over time and is gained from that original donation. And that is actually how we're able to give through grants like community grants that we hold in the fall and in the spring. So, and then finally, we inspire by working with community partners such as yourselves to help highlight the greatest needs across the region. That can be through our publications, through our website, through our social media, etc. And these findings just really help us to determine our granting priorities each year. And then I'll go over our mission, our vision really quickly. So our mission here at the Community Foundation is to create meaningful connections between donors and local charities for the permanent benefit of Southeastern Alberta. And then our vision is to foster vibrant, healthy, and caring communities today, tomorrow, and forever. And now our staff. So some of you may be familiar with Nikki Gray. She is our executive director. For me, I am Emily, as you know, and I am the main contact for any grant applications or questions or concerns. And I help out with Medicine Hat and Redcliffe, specifically for granting. We have Camelia, who is our Foundation Services Coordinator. So if you've ever called the Foundation or come in, she's the likely been your first point of contact, or it might have been Rianne, who's now on maternity leave. Then we have Helen, who's on the call right now, and she's our Regional Development Coordinator and our main contact for applicants in the region of 40 Mile, Cypress County, Oyen and District, MD of Acadia, and special areas 2, 3, and 4. And then finally, we also have Nicole on the call, and she's our Community Fund Coordinator for Brooks and District. And so she also helps out with applicants in Brooks and District and that area. Now let's go over community grants themselves. So like I mentioned before, we have 2 community grant cycles that are open in the spring and fall. So community grants provide up to $25,000 per grant, and an agency is eligible to submit one grant application per cycle. And so you can submit, one in fall, one in spring, but you can't submit 2 in spring. Multi-year funding is available, but it requires specific circumstances. So the main reason we may allow a second-year funding is if your project maybe is brand new and requires some additional time to evaluate outcomes. Additionally, if your project matches with our strategic plan, it may be considered for multi-year funding. Definitely talk to one of us if you have an idea or a pilot project that you want to introduce and you kind of need that 2-year piece. We're more than happy to walk you through and see if it would be a good fit. So yeah, if you're applying for an ongoing program, equipment program that we've previously funded, don't check the box for multi-year funding on the application as it won't be eligible. So when reviewing community grants, our committee holistically looks to support all regions of Southeastern Alberta as equitable as possible. So the committee also prioritizes the impact of the grant. For example, like, does this project support a few members of a small specific community group, or does the project support the community as a whole? What is the trickle-down impact of this project will have? These are some questions that our grants committee uses just when reviewing applications. Okay, so our granting priorities, they're available on the community grants webpage, but I'll go over them really quickly here and kind of how we got to our granting priorities. So granting priorities are decided through annual vital signs events. So we have our 2023 vital signs report, and that identified the following granting priorities, which are work and economy, connection and belonging, and then basic needs, which are food, health, and housing. For rural communities, we recently launched our Rural Futures Report last year in June, and our granting priorities for rural communities would be healthcare access, housing availability, and social isolation. Both reports are available on our website under Publications tab. It's at the very top right-hand corner of the page if you're interested in reading them. I highly recommend reading them or highlighting some things before applying, because it'll really help frame your application. On the grant application, there is a question that asks which priority your project best aligns with. And then there's also an other category if you don't think it aligns with any of the granting priorities. And you're still welcome to apply for projects that don't necessarily fit within the priority areas. And just keep in mind the committee references our publications throughout the review process, just to ensure they're evaluating appropriately based on the outcomes of the publications that we made. So there are many worthwhile applications submitted each grant cycle, which is always really, really challenging for the grants committee, as I'm sure you can imagine. Our last grant cycle in spring, or sorry, I guess I should say last year's grant cycle in spring 2025 actually had 3 times the amount of applications as in previous years. And we're expecting that outcome this year as well for spring 2026. So not all organizations or programs can receive funding, which is why they use a scoring scale, and keeping in mind things like the impact, equitable, regional support, and any priority areas. So who can apply? Qualified donees can apply, which are registered charities with the Canada Revenue Agency, and that those include registered charities, municipalities, and school divisions. Now, not to say if you're not a qualified donee, you can't apply. You absolutely can. I'll go over that in a second too. But if you're not sure whether you're a registered charity or if you might be something else, you can always visit this page. I'm just going to pop it in the chat. It is from the Canada Revenue Agency. Not sure if that's going to work. Hopefully. And that allows you to check to see if you are considered a qualified donee, registered charity, etc. If you're not a part of one of those, which they call qualified donees, again, you're still eligible to apply. The CRA recently allowed community foundations to grant to what they call non-qualified donees, and they're usually registered nonprofit societies. So our board has approved to grant funds directly to Alberta registered nonprofit societies as of fall 2024. So we've seen the administrative strain of trying to find affiliates, and we want to help smaller nonprofit or grassroots groups that are applying for grants of $5,000 or less. So your group must be registered for usually more than 5 years in good standing, according to Alberta nonprofit listings. And if you are a nonprofit or grassroots group and you do want to apply for more funding, so that means over the $5,000 limit that we have set, you can absolutely partner with a qualified donee. So again, registered charities, a municipality, or a school division through our affiliation process, which you'll see on the application. That being said, you must find a willing affiliate that makes sense for your specific group. It's become really increasingly difficult to find affiliates. I've found from feedback from applicants because just of the administrative strain for the qualified donee. So just keep in mind some may say no to your request. And in our application, there is an optional section to complete a declaration of affiliation. It's a document that is from the CRA, and it's essentially saying that the qualified donee is connected to your organization in some way with the nonprofit or grassroots group. And then they receive the funds on behalf of your nonprofit group. In addition to signing the declaration of affiliation, the qualified donee will also have to share their most recent year's financial statements and a list of board members with their contact information. I'll go over this a little bit more in detail. I find when I say qualified donee versus non-qualified donee, some people get confused and they're like, well, can I apply still? And you still can. We can still grant to both. It's just simply what the CRA calls it, and we follow it. So when a non-qualified donee, so that's the nonprofit society, partners when a qualified donee, aka such as a registered charity, they must demonstrate that the funds were used for the intended charitable activities and must prove that an active relationship exists between the two. So for example, a partnership between a qualified donee and a non-qualified donee would be the Red Cliff Legion, maybe partnering with the town of Red Cliff as a municipality, maybe for like a capital upgrade or a program that they're running. So that would make sense. Because that's a clear partnership. But for example, it wouldn't make sense for the Red Cliff Youth Action Society, for example, to maybe partner with Red Cliff Legion for capital upgrade. It doesn't really align. One is for youth, one is for seniors or for veterans. However, if they were partnering to put on maybe a program for youth at the Legion, then that would be a direct partnership. So the nonprofit or qualified donee must also demonstrate that the funds are being used for the intended charitable activities. If you're not sure that if you would be considered one or the other, again, please connect with us and we're more than happy to assist. I know this part is a little bit more on the confusing side, but we're more than happy to assist. Okay. So in addition to the qualified donee / non-qualified donee part, the applicants must serve communities across Southeastern Alberta. So we have a map here that kind of breaks out each section. If your head office is outside of our area, you're still invited to apply, but I would just recommend focusing on establishing local collaboration and partnerships beforehand. The grants committee typically won't consider applications that lack demonstrated local partnerships or a strong connection to the communities they intend to serve. It's just something to keep in mind. Additionally, we encourage you to align your project with CFSEA's vision to support vibrant, healthy, and caring communities. Just be prepared to demonstrate that your project addresses a need that has been identified and explain how it was identified by your organization or you. This could be through our publications or really your own agency's research. Your application also should articulate measurable impacts on the communities you are serving or about to serve. For diversity, equity, and inclusion, so we will provide technology support, such as one-on-one instructions for individuals maybe unaccustomed to digital platforms or submitting grants on a digital platform. And then to honor oral practices and to accommodate, again, those technical or physical barriers, We will accept recorded oral applications. The deadline to conduct an oral application is going to be March 5th, but again, we're more than happy to work with your organization or work with you in maybe getting that completed and work with on a date. If you require one of these accommodations, just please get in touch with myself, Helen, or Nicole, depending on your area, as soon as possible. We can set that up. And then ongoing support is also provided through the entire process. So that's from the letter of intent that you'll submit all the way to the final report if you're approved for funding. So please don't hesitate to reach out if there is anything we can do to help out, even if you need to talk through your application. We're, again, more than willing to help. We're great resources, I like to say. And yeah, don't ever be wary of contacting us. We really are here to help. Now I'll go over what we'll fund and what we won't fund. So we can really fund short or long-term projects. These can either be new or enhanced ongoing projects. If it's a program that we've already previously funded, you just have to be clear in explaining on how to enhance the program. So if we receive the same request year after year, there's pretty low chance that it will receive funding because the committee will be like, oh, we already funded this. We're going to give it room for somebody else, maybe that hasn't applied yet. So just keep that in mind. Administrative expenses, we will fund partially for like a project or a capital project. They're more broadly defined as costs related to regular business operations. So that would be rent, any utilities, insurance, supervisor wages, etc. And then this can be up to 10% of your grant request. So for example, if you're requesting to receive $10,000 from us, the maximum amount that you can use on admin expenses will be $1,000. And I'll go into more detail on that when I go over the budget and how to fill that out. And then capital and equipment-based projects. They are eligible for up to $10,000. So some examples could be fencing, building enhancements, maybe a stove, computers, AC units, etc. So again, multi-year funding is an option for organizations that are implementing a pilot project or really substantially enhancing an existing project. And again, may require additional time to measure the outcomes, but it must be specified in the application and in the budget. And then again, it's not guaranteed. So even if you do apply for multi-year funding, it's not guaranteed. It's really based on the committee's decision, or if you're approved for it, it's based on interim reporting and funding availability. I want to speak about events and conferences specifically. So if this is something that you're applying for, the committee typically likes to know that the priority will be given to events that leave a tangible impact or have follow-up components. So for example, events and conferences would ideally be free and open to community members. But if the event is restricted and the cost is really prohibitive, it's likely not going to be considered. So if you have questions about this, again, feel free to connect with me and I can answer to the best of my ability. Oh, before I end, I also wanted to go over playgrounds and recreation structures. So that limit is $2,500. And that would be any recreational courts, splash parks, etc. All right, so what we won't fund. So any projects that are outside of our region in Southeastern Alberta, again, it's totally okay if the broader organization is headquartered outside of our area, but the project itself must directly benefit residents in our region. We won't fund any core admin expenses, so that would be wages for an employee year after year, renting an office space, large capital projects. So we define this as really any new construction, expansion, renovation, infrastructure, and equipment that's over $10,000. So we can only grant up to $10,000 in those capital projects. So if you have a larger project that you do need assistance with, just be sure to include in your project budget where the other funding is coming from. So for example, we have granted to the women's shelter for their expansion, and they have broken it out in terms of like they needed new beds. So they broke out that specific area instead of, the entire thing. And then any playground and recreational structures that are over $2,500, we will not fund. Any retroactive funding, so even for multi-year grants, you can't spend the year 2 budget during year 1. And then request any over $25,000. $25,000 is our limit for community grants and is just the maximum amount that we disperse. So if your project, again, is over the amount, you can still apply for the grant, but just keep in mind that you can only apply for up to $25,000. So you will likely have to break out and kind of brainstorm on where that additional funding is coming from. So the key thing to just understand is that we really fund community benefits. So we don't fund anything that would be like ideological promotion. So if a project is, from a church or a municipality, it is still open and accessible to them, but it has to be open to the broader public and relevant to the community. So, for example, if a church, they might apply to run a free weekly community soup kitchen, and that's open to anyone, regardless of their faith. So that's totally fine. It still meets the community need, and it doesn't require participants to take part in any religious service. Okay. So before you start your application, you might want to ask yourself, what type of organization am I? Am I a registered charity or am I a nonprofit? If I'm a nonprofit and applying for over $5,000, will I need an affiliate? If you need clarity, again, just reach out to me and I'm happy to work through that with you. Second, does your project align with our mission and vision? And then audited financial statements and operating budget. So just be prepared to provide your fiscal year financial statement and operating budget in our main application. It's not required in our letter of intent, which you'll first fill out. That's our step 1. And if you don't have a financial statement, just show us what you provide your board to show your last year's financial situation. Either way, the financial statement just needs to be signed by two board members with signing authority. And it's a non-negotiable. We need this type of financial statement, as the committees will want to see this. It's quite a big requirement that they do want to see this. And then prepare your project budget. So if you're applying for equipment or infrastructure, just be sure to acquire more than one quote to demonstrate the price. Also, just make sure you're getting quotes in businesses from our region. So that would be Southeastern Alberta. Project strengths. So applicants must demonstrate at least one, but typically many of the following strengths, and it should be highlighted in their project summary. So maybe your project improves the mission and mandate of your organization and improves the services offered. So for example, an organization that recently received funding was unable to run like an integral cultural and mental health program due to old equipment. The grant they received helps them run that program directly related to their cause and is able to increase their program capacity. And then ensure your project is evidence-based and demonstrates a real need. So for example, you can reference any current local events, any news articles, statistics to prove why your project is needed for the community. And then ensure your applications promote collaboration. One recent grant recipient applied for a grant to run a program and partnered with 4 other organizations to receive referrals for at-risk youth to partake in the program. And we really love seeing collaborations with services, agencies, businesses, and the grants committee really does like to see this as well. And just be prepared to note any of these partnerships under the question that asks it in the application. We also really appreciate understanding how your own organization will be contributing to the project. So whether that's through current staff, additional funding, or really any other ways your organization shows how they're prioritizing the project to make it as successful as possible. All right, we're going to go through the budget really quick. So this is kind of a screenshot of our budget template that you will be filling out in the application. So again, the total amount that you can request is $25,000. And first and foremost, you'll want to write in the project name just right at the top here. We're asking that you include all the expenses and sources of revenue associated with the project in the first amount column. So that would be this one here. Then you'll use the second amount column to show what items that CFSEA's grant will cover. So this is helpful if the grant request is part of a larger project, right? So one of those bigger capital projects, for example, maybe we're helping you out with the kitchen. It's for $10,000. We kind of want to see where that money is going towards, but maybe, it's more than $10,000. And you're getting your funding from somewhere else, either the government, another funder, maybe your agency, etc. If there's a smaller project that you're doing and there's no other sources of revenue to fund the project, likely both amount columns are going to be the same, and that is okay. If you're just planning on using the grant money from us to fund your project, then it might be $5,000 and $5,000, and they'll both equal the same at the bottom here. And then please just write a description or notes in the second column. It really does just help our committee better understand the project and where the money is coming from. And then your total income line will automatically fill in at the bottom here as you put in funds here. We all often have questions about the budget sheet. So if you have any questions or want to set up a meeting to go over or do a more in-depth review of it, just reach out to me and I'm happy to help. Next, let's go over the expenditures. So this is your project expenditures. And here you'll explain your program costs and add descriptions kind of in the second column here. So you can see that it's in red. And it'll ask, please provide further details about anticipated project expenditures. So for this example, they're asking for $2,000 for program staff salary, and then $2,500 for program costs, and then also $500 for admin expenses. Now, keep in mind, I already mentioned this before, but we're only allowed to give 10% of admin costs, right? So these things would be utilities, rent, maybe a supervisor salary. And so that's where the $500 comes from, because it is 10% of 5,000. Or sorry, $500, yeah, from 5,000, sorry. For example, this organization decided to, add their additional $1,000 from the slide before. So they got it from a raffle fundraiser, and they added it on here to add some extra supplement to their budget and their admin expenses. If this is all done correctly, then the net income at the bottom here should equal $0. If it isn't, though, again, just reach out to us and we can help you out. And then completing the application. So we have a two-part process, and this is just to make sure that your program or project aligns with our granting priorities. So yeah, you have seven days. Well, we require up to 7 days to process your letter of intent and send you the full application. So please don't wait until the day before the deadline to submit your LOI. We manually read them, and so we typically need some time to do this to give you access to the full application. This year we have a deadline for the LOI, and that's going to be March 4th, which is a Wednesday. So you have a full month to complete that. And the letter of intent just gives us a really brief overview of your project and allows our staff to see if your program is eligible. It also provides us with an opportunity to advise you on aspects to highlight in the application. So We just like to provide you with feedback if required after the letter of intent is submitted. And so that's why we ask to do a separate letter of intent compared to previous years. I think we started this maybe last year, but if you're new to applying after a few years ago, that's why we added this piece in. So if your letter of intent is approved, you'll receive an email invite to complete your full application. And the application is split up into 3 sections. So it's your organizational information, your need and leverage, and then outcome and impact. There are things to attach like the budget and audited financials. And if you're having issues to attach any of those, again, just reach out to us and we can help you in attaching those things to your application. So here's the portal that we use. We use a program called Grant Lifecycle Management. So if you already have a profile or you think that your organization has already registered on our grant platform, please don't create a new one. We don't want to duplicate if we can avoid that. So if you aren't sure or are unable to log in, again, can't stress it enough, just give us a call and we can support you. And then if you forget your password, you can just easily reset your password at the bottom here and by clicking Forgot Your Password. If you're a new user, you will create a new account. Just a reminder, here are our deadlines. So we encourage applicants, again, to connect with our office if they want to discuss their project idea or if they have any issues throughout the application process. We just want to make it the process as smooth as possible for you all. So either Helen, Nicole, or I will connect to you if the committee has any additional questions after the application has been reviewed. Sometimes our grants committees will have additional follow-up questions. We'll send you those if they come in. And again, yeah, the grant deadline is Monday, March 16th at noon. And then the LOI deadline is Wednesday, March 4th at 4:30 p.m. I mentioned this a little bit before, but I'll just go over quickly about our application review process. So if you are applying for a grant and are located in one of our 4 rural fund areas, so that would be Brookson District, the County of 40 Mile, Cypress County, or Prairie Crocus, your grant will first be reviewed by a local advisory committee made up of residents who actually live in that area and then make recommendations for funding to the grants committee. The grants committee reviews all grants and recommendations and makes final recommendations for funding to the board of directors. Grants committee is made up of 10 community members and board members, and committee members must declare any conflicts of interest before reviewing grant applications. So for example, if a committee member sits on the board of a charity that's applying, right, they will excuse themselves during that conversation in the meeting to avoid any conflict of interest. And then grant decisions are finalized typically within 2 months of the application deadline, and notifications are made first through phone, then an email. And then the entire process probably takes about 12 weeks total. All right. Some general tips really to help you and your grant application. So when it comes time for a committee to evaluate the applications, there are many things that they consider. I always recommend referring to one of our current publications and the grant guideline document. That is really your cheat sheet, is the grant guideline document. So we prioritize impact and regional support. So we're looking to make a larger impact in a large region, right? Or your specific region. And then make sure to simplify and use bullet form. Some grant writers mention that we don't have enough space, right, to talk all the great things about your organization and why this program is so important. We really truly do want you to use bullet point answers so that it's straight to the point. And then use numbers to showcase impact. So for example, again, how many people are going to be impacted? How many events per year will use this equipment? Just think about the trickle-down impact. And then again, highlighting any partnerships that you have. So look for community partnerships to integrate with, or even funding partners, right? And then when in doubt, just connect with us. Can't stress this enough. We're really more than happy to help. And if you have a few ideas and you want to kind of brainstorm projects with us, we're willing to connect with you and hear them. That's it. That is our grants presentation. So again, if you're applying for a rural funds community grant, just please see the bottom of the list here for a regional contacts. Those will be Helen and Nicole.